Well, good morning, everyone. Sorry I can't be there in person this morning, but I'd like you to imagine that you're sitting in a hall waiting to hear a talk on the topic of how to find meaning in your life. The anticipation builds as the master of ceremony comes on stage to introduce the guest speaker and says, "Good evening, everyone. It's wonderful that so many people have come tonight to hear our guest speaker share about how to find meaning in your life. I'm sure you'll agree it's a great topic, and Professor John Smith, our guest speaker, has spent his adult life researching and studying this topic and is eminently qualified to speak to us this evening. But before I ask Professor Smith to share with us, he asked me to share with you his conclusion to all his life's work. Well, here it is. Meaningless, meaningless, utterly meaningless. Everything is meaningless. So without further ado, please welcome Professor John Smith to the stage. Well, what a terrible way to start a talk on how to find meaning in your life. It certainly would not have turned into a self-help book, of which there are many. In fact, there are over 60,000 available through Amazon Kindle, and I'll just show you some of the titles I found really interesting. Well, there they were. And did you notice, as you look through them, that nearly every book on that list is about what you need to do? People read these books because they want to find meaning in their life, because they want to live the good life. And I'm sure we all do. But it doesn't seem to be the experience of many people in our country today. Many young people don't feel that way. And here are some of the statistics that I shared at the recent Chasm prayer breakfast. That over 22% of young people experienced psychological distress. One in five. 20% felt lonely most or all of the time. That's an epidemic that affects all age groups in our society. And there were four pressing issues that they had. One was the cost of living, teenagers, the climate change and violence, crime and safety, along with the one we just talked about, mental health. So as we look at that, and our country is one, it's pretty bleak, isn't it? Our country is one, it's ranked 11th in the world for happiness out of 193. But then, so you might be asking this question about why are we studying Ecclesiastes? Haven't we got enough bad news already? Is the rest of the book as bad as the first 11 verses? And isn't it a really depressing book? Well, they're fair enough questions, but there are some really good reasons to study this book over the next 6 weeks. And here were the reasons suggested by Philip Ryken in his commentary on Ecclesiastes, and I'll just share those with you as well. So it says it's honest about the struggles of life and brutally honest at times, in fact. But we also study it to learn what will happen to us if we choose what the world tries to offer instead of what God has to give. But it also asks some of the big existential questions. Who am I? Why am I here? What is a meaningful life? It will also help us to worship the one true God and teaches us how we can live for God and not just ourselves. And finally, as we look at this New Testament, Old Testament book with New Testament eyes, it helps us to see that knowing and following Jesus is the only thing that makes this life of ours meaningful. So let me just pray as we start and look at the book. Father, thank you for your word. Help us as we to understand the message of Ecclesiastes. Help us to work hard and understand this at times difficult to understand book, but help us to know what you're speaking uh, to us through it and to apply it in our lives. Amen. Well, the first thing that we're looking at is where does Ecclesiastes fit in the context of the Bible? And it comes in, it's one of the wisdom books, and it comes between Proverbs and Job. And the Bible Project team suggests that each of these books answers the same set of questions. What kind of world are we living in? And what does it look like to live well in this world? In other words, they ask, how do I live the good life? Not according to our world, but according to God and His Word. So we can imagine that Proverbs is like this brilliant young teacher who's just come out of uni, has all this knowledge, skills, strategies, but hasn't put it into practice yet. Job is like the old man who's struggled through life and has come to accept that only God knows really how best the world works. And in the middle is Ecclesiastes, which is like the middle-aged teacher or preacher who has seen life and through his own efforts to do it has realized that life really can't be controlled and we shouldn't try. So our second question is, who is the author of Ecclesiastes? Well, it's been widely accepted that Solomon is the author, even though he's actually never named as such. But all that's written in the book, all the different experiences that the teacher seeks to find fulfillment in life, suggests it may have been Solomon who wrote Ecclesiastes. Solomon had everything that a person could ever want, yet even that didn't satisfy. And if it didn't satisfy Solomon, it will never satisfy anyone. So let's jump in and see what we can learn from this intriguing and at times baffling book. There are two characters involved, and we'll call one the narrator and the other one the teacher. The narrator introduces the teacher, giving a summary of his argument in the verses that we read this morning in chapter 1, verses 1 to 11. The narrator also gives the final summary in chapter 12, verses 8 to 14. So let's look at those verses again. I guess we don't need to put them up, but it's the words of the teacher, son of David, king in Jerusalem. Meaningless, meaningless, says the teacher. Utterly meaningless. Everything is meaningless. So that's that word again. Is the teacher really saying that everything in life is meaning? Like doesn't have any purpose at all? Well, there probably is a better translation of the Hebrew word that we translate meaningless. It's not the teacher's intention to make out that our universe and everything in it is pointless and life has no meaning, because there are continual references throughout the book where we're told that life is a gift from God and there are good reasons to live well and to enjoy life. But this word meaningless is included 37 times in Ecclesiastes and is the word havel. And it may be better translated vapor or breath, and in different places in the book means emptiness, fleeting, baffling, or frustrating. It's like being in a fog and trying to grasp the fog in our hands. It just slips through. What we thought we could hold just disappears as we try to grasp it. And it's the same with our lives. The teacher argues that there's nothing that we can pursue that can bring us ultimate satisfaction in our lives in this life. Everything that we strive to gain, popularity, prestige, power, possessions, profit, will eventually disappear like the mist. And no matter how hard we try to hold on to them, we can't. The same thoughts are echoed throughout the Psalms and the letter of the letter that James wrote in the New Testament. He said in chapter 4, "Why? You do not even know what will happen tomorrow. What is your life? You are a mist that appears for a little while and then vanishes." And the same Hebrew word havel is used in this verse for mist. It talks of the brevity of our lives. So we're left with a description of life as a vapor, something we can't grasp or hold on to, something fragile and fleeting. Our lives are short and hard to fathom. That doesn't make them valuable or worthwhile, but there are times when we struggle to make sense of it all. Sometimes times we're overwhelmed by the struggles we face, times when we think that we've got it all sorted, but we find that we haven't. The author Frederick Forsyth once said, "I've climbed to the top of the mountain, and when I made it, there was nothing there." Well, the big question that Ecclesiastes is asking is, what do people gain from all their labours at which they toil under the sun? And this is the big question that governs the teacher's search throughout the book. And the question is repeated 3 other times through the book, just in case we missed it the first time. There's two important things there. One is the word gain, and the phrase under the sun are key to understanding this question. The first is that word gain. The Hebrew word for gain is an economic term. It sort of means refers to what's left over after all the expenses have been paid. What profit do we actually keep after all our efforts in life? We work, we strive, we build, but what do we get in the end? What truly lasts? We know that God sees work as a good thing, and He's created us to work, whether paid or unpaid, and that work helps us to be part of human society, to contribute to helping others and ourselves to flourish. So this question hits at the core of human striving. Whether in business, family, ministry, or personal goals, we want to make our work feel like our work matters, like our lives count. Well, Ecclesiastes asks us to think deeply and honestly about what we're chasing and whether it will truly satisfy us. But at the end of it, ask the teacher, what is the profit? What is the gain? Will it be worth it in the great scheme of things? After all is said and done, what's left over? What do we take with us? And it's said that Alexander the Great wanted his arm left out of the coffin to show that despite everything we might do or accomplish, we leave it all behind. And wasn't it Jesus who said in Matthew, what good will it be for someone to gain the whole world, yet forfeit his soul? And Jim Elliot, who was killed sharing the gospel with an unreached people group in South America, said, he is no fool who gives what he cannot keep to gain what he cannot lose. He gave of himself for the gain of others. And the second theme or concept in this verse is the phrase under the sun. Under the sun is a phrase that's repeated 29 times throughout the book, and it refers to the here and now, the present life, the world as we perceive it. It signifies life and experiences that are lived on earth, in contrast to life in eternity. However, God is not excluded from the teacher's reflections, as we'll see as we travel through the book. And Christopher Ash said, God is very much involved and active in life under the sun, though it seems to add to rather than solve that's the teacher's problems. And that's true for us too, isn't it? How often have we thought that as Christians when we face trials and difficulties, or we see our church people in our church family struggling, that it just doesn't seem right? But the teacher is telling us that we are not immune from the problems of living under the sun. It is part of our human existence for everyone. Deb and I love musicals, and one of our favourites is Les Mis. And in that music is musical is an incredibly sad song that reflects that life doesn't seem fair and happiness is fleeting. Fontaine is one of the main characters, and her beautiful song, I Dreamed a Dream, reflects what life is like under the sun for her. She sang of a time when men were kind, when a time when love was blind, a time when the world was a song and the song was exciting. But then she sings, there was a time when it all went wrong. And the tragic lines at the end of her song are these. And there are storms we cannot weather. Now life has killed the dream I dream. A writer was reviewing this song and said, yet it always feels like it's being sung for the first time in a world where hope was never more than a flicker. And it's almost as like the reviewer had read the book of Ecclesiastes and was recognizing that life of Fontaine was Havel, empty, fleeting, like a vapor. And you can almost feel the sadness and the slumped shoulders and hear the tears in the words of the song, can't you? And it makes you angry, isn't it? It's just not right. It's not the way that God planned it or designed it to be. We did know there was a time when the world and everything in it when first created was perfect, where perfect relationships existed between God, Adam and Eve and creation and each other. But we also know that there was a time when it all went wrong, when people decided they knew better than God, when they were tempted to find their meaning and satisfaction in their own wisdom rather than trusting in the goodness and wisdom of God. And since that time, since sin entered our world, our lives have been characterized by broken relationships, frustration, sadness, and ultimately death. As Nancy Guthrie says, as much as we might hate to hear how messed up this world is, it is good for us to embrace this reality because doing so has the power to save us from the unrealistic expectations that life is somehow going to be different from this for us as Christians. And this is the reality the teacher is trying to impress on us. The teacher is not like the self-help books who tell us if we just do the right things, then life will be right. He's telling us that life is not predictable, that it will disappoint, and there'll be times of pain and sadness. And this is just as applicable for Christians as it is for those who are not. But thankfully, living this side of the cross, we can see that God has put things right. And as we heard from Rob and Di over the past 4 weeks in the series on heaven, that everything will one day be right. Just for now, as it says in 1 Corinthians 13, we see in a mirror dimly, but then face to face. One day we will see the providence of God in those difficult times, but now as we trust in his goodness and sovereignty, we can say, in the words of Charles Spurgeon, a minister who suffered greatly during his life, as did Nancy Guthrie as she lost children. Spurgeon said, the sovereignty of God is a pillow upon which the child of God rests his head at night, giving perfect peace. But as we look over this verse, what do people gain from their labours at which they toil under the sun? You might be thinking, well, if in the end there is no gain, no profit when we get to the end of our lives, will anything be worth it in the scheme of life? If in the final analysis we are going to die, and if the answer to the question in this verse is, we will gain nothing, then the teacher's conclusion that life is a vapour and meaningless is correct. Then that's it. We may as well pack it in and go home. Don't worry about morning tea. Let's go. Please don't. But we need to stop ourselves and ask, is verse 2 all really all we can say? That life is meaningless and vapour. Is that the whole truth about human life? To find that answer, we need to stay with the teacher because his journey has just started. His question now becomes his quest. And over the coming weeks, we'll join the teacher on his quest as he investigates life and tries to find meaning and satisfaction in a world where life is short and doesn't work the way we want it to. As part of this, the teacher wants to consider this question that David Gibson has in his book, which is called Living Life Backwards. And Gibson asks, if we won't live forever or even long enough to make a lasting difference to the world, then how should we live? And this will be the question that comes back time and time again throughout the rest of the series. Well, don't panic. The rest of our passage will be much quicker than the first 3 verses. Whew, I think I can hear you saying. In verses 4 to 11, the narrator now starts explaining the teacher's first comments and arguments. In this poem, he describes a series of things that never seem to be going anywhere or gaining anything. In verses 4 to 7, he gives examples from creation, from nature, and in verses 8 to 11, he gives examples from human experience. And I'll just bring those up. Well, in verses 4 to 7, he gives those examples from creation, and he says, generations come and go, but the earth stays forever. Well, apparently, Generation Alpha has now been replaced by Generation Beta, where children are being born from now in 2025 onwards. Apparently, generations go for 15 years. And how do these generations compare, though, to the Earth, which are ancient? They're transient. They move on, and a new generation comes on, while the Earth remains, although we are seeing that creation groans. I've now seen in my lifetime 6 generations, including my own, the baby boomers coming and going. Is there any real change that's taken place? In verse 5, we see that the sun rises each day and then sets and rises again. The Hebrew word for hurries in this suggests that the sun is panting as if it's weary and tired. But also, as we see in the repetition, we see the rhythms of nature. The good gift of a loving God who provides the sun and the earth's rotation around the sun, the seasons that provide us with the necessary conditions for us to grow crops and provides food for us to eat. The final 2 verses, 6 and 7, provide 2 more examples of the rhythms in nature, where the wind is constantly in motion, the streams continue to flow over and over again back into the rivers. God has put these rhythms in place for our benefit, a good gift from a loving God. Well, next, the narrator gives us some examples from our human experience. And these examples, as we listen to them, are cyclical, as in the ones from nature, but they seem to have the same weariness and futility that we find in verse 2, being very different from the cycles of nature. In verse 8, all things are wearisome, more than one can say. The Hebrew word things in verse 8 can be translated as words as well as things. I think it's appropriate because some people are great at talking and talking, going round and round without really ever getting anywhere. I remember reading about a sign that was written in Texter above one of those automatic hand dryers that you find in bathrooms, at airports, and at shopping centres. And the sign said, "Press here for a message from the Prime Minister." It's so true, isn't it? There's so much talk and so little progress to ever show for it. But we all want to seem to want more, and we're pretty good at it, aren't we? We often talk about something of little consequence for a long time. And the verse 9 and 10, what has been will be again. And it would be funny if it wasn't sad, but after 45 years in education, those 2 verses are so true. When a new policy or teaching strategy was presented at a staff development day, teachers who had had a lot of experience and been around for a while, we just sort of look at each other with a slight nod as if to say, well, it's about the right amount of time, 10, 15 years since it was announced as a new development, a new policy last time. That's not saying it's not bad to revisit it, but more the fact that it's just new. Things come back again and again. And don't we keep repeating our same mistakes? As the saying goes, the only thing we learn from history is we learn nothing from history. Even new inventions fall into categories of human experience, like communication and transport. The iPhone was preceded by the first mobile phone, which was preceded by the cordless phone, which was preceded by the first analog phone, which was preceded by etc., etc., etc. In fact, things might seem new because we have forgotten what came before. And finally, in verse 11, the narrator's poem finishes, "No one remembers the former generations, and even those yet to come will not be remembered by those who follow them." Well, if it isn't bad enough, there really isn't anything new. Even those things that were new back then will be forgotten. Who's used a fax machine in the past 5 or 10 years? Who's even seen one apart from in a salvo store? Yet when I started teaching, they were amazing. This new technology, they were incredible. They were indispensable, and they were for a while. And isn't it true that we would like ourselves to be always remembered, to be indispensable? But the truth is that our descendants won't remember us any more than we remember our descendants. And the narrator says that even the things and people who haven't even been born yet will not be remembered by those who come after them. And I've been in enough places to know that no one is remembered forever. It used to worry me, but not so much now. But it's okay because the one who made me knows me better than I know myself and loves me just the same. Beautiful Psalm 139 says, "You have searched me, Lord, and you know me." Well, thus finishes the narrator's introduction. And so for the next 11 chapters, the teacher takes us through his quest, which we will be taking with him over the next 5 weeks. And here are some of the things, some of the questions that we'll be answering. So we're looking for, can we find ultimate meaning in wisdom, pleasure, and work? How can we understand the role of humans in our world and dealing with frustrations? And if our knowledge is limited, then who knows what is good and what can we do about the uncertainty of the future? And finally, in chapters 11 and 12, how do we live with the uncertainty of the future? And what do we do about the final conclusion that the teacher makes? Well, where does this passage leave us this morning? What do we make of it? What can we take home and ponder on and then put into practice? The message of Ecclesiastes chapter 1 might feel dark and hopeless. And in a way, that's exactly the point. The teacher wants us to feel the emptiness of life when God is not at the center. He wants us to stop pretending that anything that we could do under the sun can give us ultimate meaning on our own. We read that generations come and go, that words are wearisome, that nothing is really new, that we can go round and around repeating the same things until one day we are gone and soon won't be remembered. So to answer the question posed in verse 3, in the end we don't gain anything from our toil under the sun. But does that mean we give up, throw our hands in the air and think, oh, this is too hard? It would be easy to think that, but there's more that Ecclesiastes wants to teach us than just meaningless. There is hope. If you remember back, we talked about the rhythms of life as seen in nature, the sun, the wind, and the sea, the cycles that they go through, the good gifts of a loving God. And as we look beyond what we can see here under the sun, we see a good God who knows our frailties, who knows our needs, and knows that we cannot make sense of life here on our own. And he's given us another gift, the gift of his one and only Son, the Lord Jesus. He came to live the life that we can't live, a perfect life that did not try to get gain for himself, but was a gift that was gained for us. And as Charles Wesley's wonderful hymn says, and can it be that I should gain an interest in the Saviour's blood? Amazing love, how can it be that thou, my God, should die for me? So as we conclude, let's ask that question again slightly differently. What do I gain from Jesus, for whom he toiled and died under the sun? And the answer is everything. Abundant life here and abundant life with him forever. Have I done anything to deserve it? Have I toiled? No, it's God's free gift. So how should that affect the way I live today and tomorrow? Well, some ideas. Be thankful to God for his wonderful gifts of grace. Remember that our security and significance come from what Jesus has done for us, nothing that we toil for ourselves. Keep trusting him in the messiness of life, for the disappointments, baffling moments, and frustrations that come our way, living in the certain hope of the new day to come. And don't strive to make your life meaningful. Stop, look around, enjoy the small pleasures, the things that we often rush past. Let me pray. Sorry, phone call. Let me pray. Father, thank you for the book of Ecclesiastes and what it teaches us about you. Help us to know how to live well under the sun for your glory and our good. Amen.